Okay, we're recording. Welcome, everybody. Let me adjust my camera. There we go. That way you can see more of my handsome face. My beard seems to have something in it, as usual. So it's going to bother me a little bit. Is that on my sweater? There's something. It's okay. So welcome. I thought today we could talk about, and by we, I mean, no, we. It's nice. It's nice when it's more of a conversation. So I thought we could talk about ignorance is bliss, or rather, ignorance is not bliss. And I think that so we'll just look at this. We'll look at this. So if you're not a native English speaker, you may not know this expression. So the expression is a common English expression. Ignorance is bliss. And the idea is that the state of ignorance is actually enjoyable, and that when that state of ignorance is broken and we begin to see things as they are, that we lose the bliss. And I think that this is I think it's a common expression because it's a pervasive belief, whether you think you believe it or not. I think most of us on some level believe that this is true. I think we can see it. I mean, we can see it in so many ways, right? You can see it like as a child, you probably have memories of feeling afraid in the night, perhaps, and you just pull the covers over your head, hoping somehow that's going to help. And maybe later on in life, things are challenging, whether it's a relationship challenge, career challenge, health challenge, and we do the equivalent of pulling the blankets over our heads. We still default to ignorance is bliss. We still kind of believe it. And so I will propose to you. I will propose to you that ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is actually strenuous. Ignorance is distressing. And why is ignorance distressing? Well, because literally it's in the word. So ignorance is not, in fact, I think oftentimes we confuse ignorance and innocence, but they're not the same thing. Ignorance and innocence are very different. And so we are inherently innocent, and this is effortless. You don't have to do anything for our innocence. Your innocence actually can't be touched. Can you maybe see how that's true, that your innocence can't be touched? Your innocence remains unblemished, regardless of what you've experienced. Your innocence is always at the core. It's always here. Always, 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 always. There's nothing that can harm it. There's nothing that can diminish it. There's nothing that can touch it in any way. It's just a given. But ignorance, on the other hand, is requires a lot of effort. It's strenuous. And it's in the word ignorance. To ignore, to be ignorant is to ignore. So here's an interesting experiment. If you want to play along, you can. If you don't want to play along, you don't have to. It's fine. But it's maybe helpful. It'll maybe shed some light on something. So if you want to play along, it's a simple experiment. Okay, maybe. Cover your left eye for a moment, and just notice that you can see through the right eye, and notice what you see through the right eye. So notice, for example, maybe you can see your nose. Probably you can see some part of your nose, and that's probably kind of more toward the left extreme range. But then notice that you can see pretty far over to the right as well. So notice what you can see over to the right. You could probably be aware of, I don't know, whatever's over there. You just notice. You notice that you can see pretty far over there, and then you can sort of sweep the field of vision. And you can see that you can see fairly far from right to left. Now, just be aware of what you see over there to the right. Now, cover your right eye. And let's do the same little experiment with the left eye open. So notice that with the left eye, you can do the same thing. You can just notice what you can see from left to right and right to left. So you can probably on the right, you can see the nose. Interesting to notice, by the way, that the nose is both on the left and the right. It's very odd, isn't it? And then you notice what you can see over to the left. So you can see fairly far over there, and you just notice what can you see? What are you aware of over there? And then you can open both eyes. Now, are you aware now of more than you were previously? Maybe you're not aware that you're aware of more. Maybe you're aware that you're aware of more. Maybe you're aware that your field of vision seems to be expanded or enlivened. But here's an interesting thing. Okay. Notice that so you can have your eyes open, and so this vision is occurring. But even though you can be aware of what's over on the right or over on the left, are you always aware? And of course you're not. How often are you actually aware of what's over there or over there? And how often are you aware of both of them at the same time? You can notice that you can be aware of them at the same time right now. Isn't that so? Aren't you able to be aware of both at the same time? You can be aware of, you could take your hands and you could put your hands on the sides at the extremes of your field of vision, and you could notice you can see both, you can be aware of both hands simultaneously. Yeah, less awareness of the peripheral. It's a habit though. And this actually is sort of my point, which is that even though this is all effortlessly here, and we can be effortlessly aware of it, we're not consciously aware of it most of the time. Most of the time, we're looking at things sort of, we turn our head usually. We orient ourselves, the head and the eyes kind of get locked, and we just look in that way. And we're just sort of looking at whatever is directly in front of us, in front of the head. Even though we have this expansive field of awareness. So here's the interesting question. Which is easier? To be fixated or to be just openly aware? And your answer to that will depend upon your conditioning. Because if you're very habituated to fixation, you will say, well, fixation is easier. because you'll say expansive, open awareness is hard, but it's not. It's just unfamiliar, maybe, or it's not your habit. So in fact, it requires more effort to be fixated. It's actually more muscular effort required. So why is it that we make the effort to be ignorant, to ignore? We're the nervous system can filter out. I think I've mentioned this several times, but it's an interesting thing to mention again. And I've talked about this experiment that was done, I think, at the University of Illinois, where they have a name for this phenomenon, but basically, in this particular case, they have a video and they say, watch the video and notice how many times they've got people passing a basketball. The people wearing the blue shirt pass the basketball to another person wearing a blue shirt, something like that. And you watch the video and you're counting, and then they say at the end of this video, they say, and did you notice the man in the gorilla suit? You say, no, I did not notice the man in the gorilla suit. You go back and you play it, and sure enough, now that you've been told there's a man in a gorilla suit, you're looking for the man in the gorilla suit, and you see the man in the gorilla suit walks out right into the center, waves, and goes on across. So it was totally in plain view. But the nervous system filters it out based upon what it is that is being directed to fixate on. So we actually have to make effort to not see. I'm sure they use this I'm sure they used the man in the gorilla suit for a reason, because there's an expression, the what is it? You have the elephant in the room, but there's also the 900-pound gorilla or something like that. It's the thing that we're working hard to ignore. It's right here, but we're working to ignore it. So it's in our open field of awareness that's effortlessly so. And then we work hard to ignore it. But because it's a habit, and because we're usually conditioned to be terrified that if we don't do that, then we'll die, or others will die, or the torture will ensue, we're very highly motivated to continue to fixate and to lie to ourselves and tell ourselves that no, ignorance is bliss. Because we tell ourselves, oh, I can't handle it. I can't handle anymore. It's too much. But this is what we can't handle, actually, is we can't handle any more ignorance, because the ignorance requires too much effort. So we're under a great deal of strain, but we've got it inverted. We think that we perceive the strain, but we think that the strain is because we're not doing enough. We're not ignoring enough. We're not fixating enough. We're not working hard enough. And so we continue down this path, this vicious cycle of continued ignorance, i.e. strain. And we just keep piling it on, hoping that it's going to do something, change something, hoping that somehow that's going to fix the problem. And if we're really honest, we don't even know what the problem is. So we're just sort of desperately hoping to fix the problem, but it's like we're hiding under the blankets, and we're just every once in a while like throwing spitballs or something, hoping that's going to help. So if ignorance is not bliss, maybe we can finally be done pursuing ignorance. Maybe because we didn't want ignorance, right? We didn't come into this life saying the goal of my life is ignorance. Nobody really is excited about ignorance. Nobody's highly motivated on the surface in the pursuit of ignorance for its own sake. People don't want ignorance. It doesn't sound nice. They want bliss. And then they confuse the means the ignorance for the actuality. So if we can see that we just want bliss, we don't want ignorance, then I think we've taken a big step. If we can see that just that much, if we can see that what we actually want is bliss, not ignorance, I think that's a very large step in the right direction. So then the question is, if you're with me up to this point, and maybe you're not, maybe you disagree. If you do, you let me know. But if you're with me on this, if you kind of agree that, yeah, I'm not really looking for ignorance, I want bliss. Maybe that's loaded. Maybe you say, I don't know if I want bliss. I've been told I shouldn't want bliss. We're very confused. Do I want bliss? Do I not want bliss? We thought we wanted bliss when we were in touch with our innocence. We thought we wanted bliss. We didn't even want bliss. It was just was bliss. And then as we kind of lose sight of our inherent innocence, then we say, wait, I want bliss. And then at some point we read one too many books and we learned this devastating, horrible thing that says you shouldn't want bliss. You should not want anything. You should not have any desires. Desire is evil. Desire is the root of all suffering. Love of money is the root of all evil, whatever. And you learn that, oh no, this is bad. You don't want bliss. But then you're confused, right? Because what do you want? And then now you're just floating around and you just get hung up on, well, I don't know. I'll settle for ignorance. But I think we want bliss. So let's take a look at what is the most direct path to bliss. So this is two-part today. First part was ignorance is bliss. Second part is what is the most direct route to bliss? So first of all, in order to really answer this, we have to get kind of clear on what is bliss. What is it that we really want? And then secondly, we have to get clear on how do we how do we achieve that. Achieve is a loaded word, but I'll just use it anyway. So what is it? First of all, what is it that we really want? I'm using the word bliss, but let's just forget about that for a moment. What do you really want? Because if we're not clear on what we want, then what happens is, and you can see the truth of this, we get, excuse me, we get caught in this vicious cycle of ignorance. Because if we don't know what we want, then we're going to start to perceive that we're overwhelmed. And so we're going to go on the defensive and we're going to start to shut down. We're going to start to ignore. But we don't realize how strenuous this is, how much effort we are making to maintain this defensive posture. So here's the thing, when we get stuck in that, we lose sight of what do I want. Instead, all we're fixated on is what do I not want. So our life becomes consumed by trying to protect against what we don't want. So now we're all inverted because we just are fixated on what we don't want, trying to protect ourselves against that. And we're not even realizing that we're making this terrible mistake because we're energizing exactly what we don't want. So so let's get clear on what do we want. And I think this is actually a very I think this is maybe, well, you tell me. Okay. So I'd actually like to hear from you. And you can answer in the text chat, or you could answer, you can unmute yourself and respond briefly. As usual, I will warn you, I'm recording this and it will be going up on YouTube public. It will be publicly available. So if you speak, it will be in the recording. But I'm interested in hearing from you briefly. What do you want in life? What do you want? What will satisfy you? What are you actually wanting?
I would say peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Thank you. So a lot of people are off camera today, so I don't know if everybody's just sleeping. That's possible. Or maybe you're very deep in thought. Bliss, but what is it really? Yeah, great.
Not sleeping.
Yeah, not sleeping. Okay. So so it's a challenging question though, isn't it? It's kind of actually a challenging question. What do you want? Because when you have to really look, when you have to actually honestly look, then maybe you realize your confusion, right? I mean, not nobody, very few people are responding.
Clarity.
Clarity, great. Yeah, clarity is a good answer, because if you have clarity, then you'll know what you want. So it's so when we actually are faced with what do I really want, then maybe we start to realize just how much we've been fixated on what we don't want. Because we know all the things we don't want, right? I mean, I could give you a long list of all the stuff that I don't want. This whole meeting could just be me telling you all the stuff I don't want. We could, seriously, I could go on for a long time, all the stuff that I don't want. And you probably could too, because we've had a lot of experiences, and a lot of those experiences, our reaction is, whoa, didn't want that. So we have a long list of all the stuff that, didn't want to get bullied, didn't want to get spat upon, didn't want to have somebody steal my food, all these things. You just go on and on and on, all the things that you don't want. But then when we say, well, what do you want? And we're not really sure. Because it's like everything, we've been so fixated on what we don't want. That's sort of all we know. We actually measure what we want based upon what we don't want. What we want is really just the absence of what we don't want, right? So you say, and not, I appreciate the answers, but if we consider, for example, peace of mind, which is one of the answers. Okay, if you want peace of mind, what is peace of mind? I mean, if you're like most of us, peace of mind is actually just a way of defining what you want based on what you don't want, because it says, well, what I don't want is I don't want the hell that is my normal state of mind. So I want peace of mind. And if I want clarity, again, another one of the answers, which I appreciate, thank you, but consider then, what is that? Why do we want clarity? And, you know, I'm not picking on anybody, because I find myself in the same situation as you. So it's not to say anything, anybody's doing it wrong. Well, yeah, we're doing it wrong, but let's just I'm not trying to be mean about it. Okay. So, but we can see, okay, what is clarity? Clarity is the absence of confusion, the absence of of uh, of stuff that obscures. So we can start, when we really start to be honest, we realize I don't even know what I want. And this is a very challenging thing to realize, because I found that if I'm really, really honest, then I find that my whole life, more or less, I have been highly invested in what it is that I don't want. And to the extent that I don't even know what I want. And so, and now here's the important part. What that means is that all of my conditioning, reinforces what I don't want. Every conditioned thought, every conditioned reaction, every belief I have. It's like, this is why people say ignorance is bliss, is because to actually see the enormity of the disaster is uncomfortable. Usually, depends, you know, maybe if it catches us at the right moment and we're very humble, then maybe we just have a sense of relief. But usually we're not quite that fortunate that those things line up. So usually what happens is, if we actually have a moment of honesty, if we really see, then we just see, wow, the enormity of this disaster that I've called my life, it's just overwhelming. It's all of these decades of fixation on what I don't want. And I'm, to the degree that I don't even know what I want, I don't even know where to begin to discover what it is that I want, because I don't know anything about it. And this is when somebody sees this is the point at which they either have a nervous breakdown, or they, you know, if you remember the movie The Matrix, they take the other pill, whichever one it was that, you remember the movies, you remember there's the one character who takes the other pill to go back into the Matrix and be a king or whatever. Okay, so sometimes we have a nervous breakdown. Sometimes we say, no, I'm gonna double down on ignorance. So now we're gonna be willfully ignorant. But there's another possibility. Okay, so this other possibility is to have to tell the truth, which is that if I stop doing what I've been doing, if I stop making so much effort to ignore, then possibly something truly new, possibly I'll see something truly new, possibly I'll discover something truly new. So Okay, so if we see the conditioning that we have, so what I mean when I say the conditioning, I mean is the habitual ways of reacting. So you just can start, like, I'll give you, let me see if I can give you some examples from my own life. Okay. So one of my challenges is what we could generally just call parenting. My relationship with I have 3 young kids, and so those relationships are some of my big challenges in life. And so I observe that in these relationships, I have there when I perceive, if I perceive that things are not going well, then I notice my habits. I notice how it is that I react. I notice the things that I say. I mean, it's the same phrases come out of my mouth over and over and over, even though they're completely ineffective. They don't get the result that I'm looking for at all. In fact, they often result in the opposite of what I want. And I know that. Okay, so this is like, when I know that, then I can't really be ignorant any longer. I could be willfully ignorant. That's a thing. It's possible, right? So I could say, please don't light that match and put it to the couch. Please don't do that. But I know that that's going to result in lighting the match and putting it to the couch. So, I mean, thank goodness my kids don't actually do that one, but you get the idea. Anybody who's a parent or been a parent, you know that these, unless you had just the perfect child, and in which case good for you. But I know that that's likely to result in exactly what I don't want. So what can I do? What I could do is I could opt for, I could have the breakdown. Sometimes it comes close to that, sometimes it's just like, I've had enough. I can't take it anymore. You little jerks, I'm out of here, But then there's the other possibility that I talked about, which is willful ignorance. Now, willful ignorance looks like this. Don't do that. Oh, you're doing that? Well, now it's all your fault and I'm angry with you. I'm gonna come after you and blame you. But the third alternative is I can take responsibility for what I'm doing. So I can see my conditioning. I can see it, and I can see this is all about what I don't want. I have no clarity in this moment about what I want. I'm very fixated on what I don't want. Now, how am I going to, of course, my kids who are, children are they're very much in touch with their innocence, aren't they? I mean, there's nothing, they're not, we project onto the kids all kinds of stuff. We project that, oh, it's a bad kid. Please, it's not a bad kid. The kid's just totally in touch with their innocence. And if they're behaving in a way that I don't like, it's because they're not feeling well. So I'm fixated on what I don't want, which only then the kids pick up on that. Kids are only complying. I'm saying, look, I have no idea what I want. I'm not clear on what I want. I only know what I don't want. And I'm fixated on that. And the kids are like, yeah, well, you're not giving us any better direction. So we'll just do the same thing that you're doing. You don't want me to light, you're fixated on me lighting the couch on fire. Oh, I guess I'll comply. So this option is I can actually just see. I can just see the conditioning and I can choose not to energize it. Now this is where it gets very sticky, because in the moment in which I'm not energizing, not fixated on what I don't want, then everything that I've been ignoring is suddenly obvious. All of my fears are just totally obvious. My total lack of control, my incompetence. It's all been unveiled in this moment. Unveiled perhaps for everybody, but certainly for me, right? I mean, that's the thing. In the moment of not ignoring, in the moment of not willfully ignoring, in the moment of being present, everything is revealed. It's all revealed to us. And this is the thing where we say, but I don't like it. Because we think, even though we have to admit we don't really know what we want, we still think that what we want is the absence of what we think we don't want. And so when we're faced with the reality of, I have failed completely, and I don't even know what I want, and I'm totally powerless. When we're in this situation, we're seeing clearly. But then most of us in that moment, we choose one of the first two options instead of the third option, because we say, wait, that's not what I want. We say, how do you know? How do you know for sure? And that's the challenge. The only way we can know for sure is to be in touch with our innocence. Because our innocence doesn't know. Our innocence doesn't know that this is what I don't want. Can't. Our innocence couldn't know that this is what I don't want, because it doesn't have anything it doesn't have any past that it can draw upon to compare. Say, this is good or bad compared to some other thing. So this is why, I assume probably you, like I, have heard people speak or read books about people's experience of what you could say, like waking up in ordinary life. So they're not, you've probably heard the stories of the people who have the extraordinary awakenings, but you've also probably heard the people who have the ordinary awakenings, just ordinary life. They didn't have to go off to the Himalayas. They didn't have to do any of that stuff. They had an awakening in their ordinary life, and they describe it often as, there's that common, I think it's a Zen expression: before enlightenment, carry water, chop wood; after enlightenment, carry water, chop wood. So ordinary life. And we hear these things and tell the truth. In the back of your mind, there's something that says, yeah, but it's not, there's something extraordinary about it. Like, yeah. I know it's ordinary and all, but when it happens to me, I'm going to know it's going to be something else. So we're still clinging to ignorance as bliss. We're just still clinging to ignorance as bliss because we think, oh, well, it couldn't be in these ordinary circumstances. It couldn't be when I'm not in control of the situation. It couldn't be then. It has to only be when I'm in control. It has to be when everybody's complying with what I say. And it seems impossible that it could happen in a situation where, in my case, my kids are upset, my wife is upset, I'm upset, that it couldn't happen in those circumstances. And so then why is it that it doesn't happen? It's for that very reason. It's only because we cling to ignorance as bliss, and therefore we are still straining to maintain what we don't want. Because what we do want is unknown. I mean, isn't that true? Isn't that actually true? If you disagree with that, you let me know, because I think that that's very true, that what we do want is unknown. Because you have not been satisfied. I haven't been satisfied. None of us have been satisfied by anything that's known. You can go back through your catalog of experiences and you can say, well, yeah, but there was that nice vacation in 1982. Or there is that first marriage and there was the honeymoon, that was good. And then, so maybe you have a few reference points, or maybe you just say, no, it's always been hell. But you haven't been satisfied. Because if you'd been satisfied, you wouldn't need to be trying to recreate those things. So if we're not satisfied, then what I'm saying, I think you can start to see the truth of, is that what we want is unknown. We haven't had it. We haven't known it. We couldn't. So how is it that we can discover or receive what it is that is unknown? And please tell me if you disagree, because if you disagree, then we should look at that. Because I don't want this to be that I just tell you how it is. I want you to actually look, and if you can see it, then maybe it's of value. If you don't see it, then I don't really suppose it's of much value at all. I mean, my intention with these meetings is that they actually offer this is an opportunity to actually look. It's not just, I know I say a lot of words, but they're all intended that we actually look for ourselves. So really look and see in this moment, because if you really look now, then you don't have to wait any longer. So my proposal again is that what we actually want is unknown. So where are we going to find it? mean, it seems obvious, right? We're not gonna find it in what's known. So there's no need to consult what's known. What's known is, I mean, for sure, any thought is known. So we don't need to consult thought. And where you consider, where did these thoughts come from? Like, I've had the experience many times, I'm mentioning the parenting thing, saying things that my parents said to me when I was a kid. But I say those things sometimes to my kids, not so much anymore, thankfully. And I know a lot of people have that experience, right? They say, oh, I've become my mother, or I've become my father, because they see that they're just on repeat. They don't know how to do anything original. They don't even know who they are, right? You don't, like, who are you? If all of your behaviors and all of your words and all of your attitudes and all of your reactivity, you can recognize as something that you learned from somebody else, then who are you? Now, there's an obvious answer to that, of course, but most of us don't identify with the obvious answer to that. Most of us identify as all of the collection of stuff that we think, do, say, and so forth. So we can start to see that all of that stuff that we've identified as is not new. For sure, it's not new. It's so not new that you're not the first one in this long line of ancestors to have the realization that you've become your parents, because your parents discovered at some point that they had become their parents, and those parents had at some point realized they had become their parents, and so forth. So you, as you identify yourself, are none other than your great grandparents. So talk about uninspired, unoriginal. When we identify as that, we literally are still trying to work out the same stuff in the same ways that our ancestors thousands of years ago were trying to work out. It's so unoriginal. So the alternative is then to recognize that what I really want is unknown. So I'm not going to consult my thoughts. I'm not going to find the answer there. I mean, I just am not. How many times have you actually found the answer in thought? So when I'm in this situation, and the truth of the situation is that I don't know. The truth, that's the truth, right? I'm here in this situation, and the real honest truth, if I just say what's really true, is I don't know. So if my kids are behaving in ways that I'm not liking, and I have a lot of feelings and reactions, and I'm uncomfortable, the real truth is I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't have a way to answer this, given what I know. What I know does not satisfy me. What I know does not actually help. What I know doesn't actually produce something new. So if I'm interested in living in a way that's truly new, truly fresh, truly satisfying, and in a way that doesn't just, so that my kids 20 years from now are not saying, oh, I've become my dad. If I want to actually be able to resolve something rather than just punting, then I have to look to what I don't know. And here's the good news. What I don't know, and some of you are going to be upset about this because you're going to think I'm cheating, but I'll say a little bit more about it. But the good news is that what I don't know is already here. So I can discover what I want by simply being present to what is. And I know, like I said, some of you are going to think I'm cheating because I've said that, and you're going to say that's not helpful. I need something to do. So, okay, we'll look at what you can do. But just hear that again. What I can discover what I want simply by being present to what is. Because what is unknown. When I overlay what was, it's going to be completely unsatisfying. Because A, it was already unsatisfying. And B, because it's a mismatch for present reality. I'm taking something that was a mismatch for thousands of years. It was never actually a match for reality. And I'm still trying to fit that overlay that onto this present reality, which is unknown and fresh, just totally new. So it will not work in a satisfying way. So I have to then, if I'm wanting to be happy, if I'm wanting to be satisfied, I have to really look sincerely at what is. I have to be present to what is. So now here's I said there were two parts. I guess this will be part 2B. Okay, so, or part 3, I'm not sure. But it's the next thing I want to mention is that what we do repeatedly we become more skilled at. So all of us are very skilled at ignorance because we've done a lot of it. And we've all got our particular techniques for ignorance. We all got together and we became very observant exactly how we do the ignorance. We would find that we've all got, if there are a million of us, we've got a million different techniques. Some of them are probably very similar, but we've got a lot of different techniques for ignorance. And we've been practicing those techniques over and over and over and over and over. And the more that we practice those techniques, the more skillful we become. So we're all very skillful in our techniques of ignorance, which is good news and bad news. So the bad news is that your default response to anything is very likely to be one of ignorance that will also be painful. The good news, however, is that if you cease to practice that and instead you practice presence, then you can expect reasonably that you will have more presence, more experience of presence, more experience of what you want. So if you find yourself at this moment, not really, when I ask you, what do you want? You're not actually all that clear on it. The good news is that you can become clear on it. All you need is a direction. And the first way the most sensible way to get a direction is, getting direction is what we would call orienting, right? So you want to orient yourself. If you want to orient yourself, not necessarily literally turning east, although I suppose you could, But if you want to orient yourself, then what's the first thing that you want to do is you want to stop. Because if you don't stop, you're gonna there's gonna be too much going on for you to have a clear sense of direction. So you'll be all turned around if you don't stop. So stopping is very, very useful as a first step. And so to stop, well, let's do it together. Let's do it together. I think that will be the best. Okay. So let's just see what's possible. So you can notice right now, whatever it is, to stop, you have to notice what you're doing. So just notice what you're doing. So when the doing has a momentum to it. So stopping is, in fact, stopping. This is an interesting thing. I think people, understandably, have challenge with stopping because they've heard that it's not a doing, but it sort of seems like a doing. It has a quality to it that's similar to doing because there's a momentum to the doing. So whatever we're doing has momentum. When we stop, we're actually reversing the doing. So it has a quality that's similar to doing, but it's not doing, it's an undoing. So you could try, let me see if I can come up with a good example. I don't know if this will make it very clear or not, but it will maybe be helpful. Just take two of your fingers, maybe the index and the thumb, and just press them together. Don't hurt yourself, but press them together. And then slowly release that, very as slowly as you can. You might be surprised how slowly you can do it. And don't pull them apart, just, they might come apart. They might not come apart. It depends maybe on various factors, but just cease to press them together. So notice that you can press them together and then you can ease up on that so that they're not pressing together. Doesn't really illustrate very well the momentum quality, but that's okay. But you can notice that in order to release the effort, if you're making the effort to press them together and then you release that, it requires something, doesn't it? I mean, you have to actually be present to the experience. You have to be observant. And it produces a noticeable change in the experience, doesn't it? You know, you can sense when you're pressing them versus when you're releasing them, which is an interesting thing, because if you consider this, the muscles involved in pressing the fingers together are also involved in releasing. The same muscles are actually contracted in both the pressing and the releasing, which is, I think, what lends this quality to the experience of the release or the stopping that seems to be a doing, because it has this quality of there is a perception, and rightfully so, of exertion, because in the release there is still is exertion, but there's less. You're lessening the exertion. So stopping is not something that necessarily happens in a flash. It could happen in a flash, but we can consciously stop. We can consciously stop by being aware of what we're doing. So what are things that you could be aware of? Well, you might be aware of how you compulsively think. You could become aware of fidgeting that you do. You could be aware of a general sense of strain or anxiety. There's a lot of things you could become aware of. And then you can become aware of how you are doing these things. So like with the fingers pressing together, if I say, notice this, if the fingers are pressing together and then I say, okay, I want you to take the fingers apart. If the goal is just to take the fingers apart, you might do that in a very different way than if you slowly release the fingers. Because in fact, the muscles involved in pulling the fingers apart are different than the muscles involved in releasing the fingers pressing together. It's just a physiological fact. So this is why how we perceive something matters, because if we perceive that releasing the fingers pressing together is the same as taking the fingers apart, we're not going to get a satisfying outcome, because we're not actually observing what we're doing. We're just trying to correct it superficially, or we're just trying to take instructions superficially, or we're trying to produce something superficially. So if I say stop, and oftentimes we hear these kinds of things, or we understand it in this wrong way. We hear that thinking is a problem, or we become aware of, oh, my thinking is so unpleasant. Wish I wasn't thinking all the time. Or maybe we have an experience of no thought and we say, oh, that was so nice. I wish I could do that all the time. So then maybe we try to stop thoughts. Well, the problem is there's 1.5 million ways to do that, and then most of them are not going to be satisfying, because most of them are just going to produce more strain without actually stopping. So we're just layering more strain on top of existing strain. And again, it's because of ignorance, because we still, on a fundamental level, believe that ignorance is bliss. So we have to actually be willing to see what's actually happening. We can't stop until we can see what's actually happening. So just see what's happening now. Just notice it in your experience. Just notice it, and notice all of the compulsive ways in which you attempt to fix it. And you can see how all of those ways are still ways of trying to regain control. I'm going to be in charge. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. And then we can just tell the truth, which is, well, that's never worked out very well. And even if I regained control, even if I got to be in charge of everything, do I want that? We think we want it. Sometimes, yeah. But we don't. We don't really want that, because you can imagine if you had it, then what? Now suddenly you've got to be now you're law enforcement. I don't want to be law enforcement. Sounds like a miserable job.
Joey, could you give an example of how you do that in parenting? So how
Yeah,
you-
well, okay, great. Thank you for asking. So, yes. Okay, so no surprise to some of you, I would guess. I find always. Now, I don't know that it will always be the case, so I'm not proposing that it will always be the case, but thus far I have always found that when I actually look, all that's actually going on is that I'm tensing up. So I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let me take a step back. Okay, so I'll just walk you through the process. So, okay, so sort of like worst case scenario would be I'm with my kids by myself. My wife is somewhere else. So it's three against one. And let's say they're all finding this challenging, and I have concerns for some of their safety. So this is a situation in which I'm likely to have a lot of strong feelings. So I notice, first of all, straight away, I mean, I just observe that I don't have any useful thoughts. If I have a useful thought, I'm perfectly happy to make use of it. It's just I just noticed I don't have any useful thoughts. I mean, all my thoughts, my conditioned thoughts, and maybe it's just because I'm a bad person and maybe everybody else is a good person, but I'll just be honest with you, my conditioned thoughts are not pretty, I mean, it's stuff I wouldn't actually do, but it's like over the top, I'm gonna like yell and throw stuff and smash stuff, and because it's like, this is overwhelming. I want everybody to stop. I want everybody to comply with what I think it should be happening. So I see that my thoughts are not helpful. So, okay, great. I can just move on. I don't have to do anything there. I can see that all the images are unhelpful, because the images are also more of what I don't want. The images, I have images that are sometimes things that could happen that I would perceive as bad, reactions I might have, more of the same. So the images, the memories, the thoughts, none of that is helpful. So I just look. I'm not dismissing it out of hand. I'm just looking. None of this seems to be helpful. I'm in a position where I'm like, I need some help. I'm not doing so well. I want things to be better. I don't know what to do. So I'm humble enough that I'm willing to consult anything that's available to me. So I'm not going to say, oh, thoughts are bad. In the moment, I'll look. Any useful thoughts? Okay, no. Great. So now I don't need to continue to focus on that. Any useful images? No. Any useful memories? No. So then what, in my experience and in my process, what I invariably come to is, once I've kind of scanned through everything, I see, well, what's actually happening? Now, and this is an important thing, because if there's actually something that needs, I know I'm clear on what my priorities are in regard to my children. My number one priority is to keep them safe. If it really comes down to it, high priority is not to traumatize them, but if it comes down to it and it's between traumatizing them and keeping them safe, I'll keep them safe. Sorry to all the purists out there. But I can look and see, okay, thankfully, thus far in my parenting life, I've not actually been in a situation where it was so urgent and I'm like needing, I'm not needing to yank them out of their bed and carry them down a fire escape because there's a fire about to burn them. So I haven't found myself in a position yet, thankfully, in which I have to choose between just taking action to protect them at the risk of traumatizing them. Although some would argue that just my mere presence is traumatizing. But when I see this, then what I come to is, well, seems to be a disagreement. Seems to be a disagreement. They've got one idea, I've got a different idea. If nobody's really being harmed here, I've got a little bit of space. I don't need to necessarily physically intervene. And I can just notice what is the problem? It's amazing to me, 99% of the time, there's not actually a problem. 99% of the time, I believe there's a problem. I'm thoroughly convinced there's a problem. In the heat of the moment, if you said, is there a problem? I would probably look at you and I would say rather, in probably a rather aggressive tone, yes, there's a problem. But when I actually pause and I look, I see, well, I don't know. So now what can I say is actually happening? I mean, I want to blame something. I want to blame someone, but nothing seems to be available for me to get hold of to say, this is it. I can't find the culprit. I can't find the problem, in fact. All I know is, for example, they're making some noises that I don't like. So then, and by the way, it's perfectly allowable for me just to decide, you know what, I really don't like that noise. And I would like for you to not make that noise when you're in the house near me. I'm allowed to have that preference. I'm allowed to express that preference. But more fundamentally, what I want to see for my own well-being is, what noise am I making that's bothering me? Because that's 99% of the time, that's really what's going on. And that noise that I'm making comes down to some kind of tension that I'm holding. So I just observe and I just notice where I'm doing that. So if I am, I mean, you could test this out, by the way, if anybody who wants to do it. I'm trying to think of like all the examples that are coming to mind just sound so horribly unpleasant. I wouldn't actually. I was thinking you could just clench your teeth for a whole day, or I was thinking you could strain your chest for a whole day, but and those sound horrible. Hold your breath. But if you make a posture, if you hold a posture of conflict, guess what? You're going to perceive conflict in your life. And I find this over and over and over. I mean, I'm perceiving conflict, and in fact, all that's happening is I'm just holding a posture of conflict. So what I see then is it worth me holding this posture of conflict? What benefit am I getting from holding this posture of conflict? I mean, I've seen this in myself thousands upon thousands of times, and I've coached enough people in this now and gotten enough feedback that I'm fairly confident it's just universally true for humans that almost always it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. I'm not actually standing to benefit or gain anything from this posture of conflict. It's just what is known. So that, and who knows exactly how exactly that got encoded. I mean, I could look back and I could say, well, I remember certain things. I remember certain expressions on my dad's face. I remember certain tones. I remember certain things. I could see it in him. So maybe that I just, through mirror neurons, just picked it up. But however it happened, I learned these things and I've been repeating them over and 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 over. And I can see that it's, for a long time, I could blame other people because I didn't have enough experience. So I could still kind of fool myself into thinking, yeah, what's up with that neighbor? Because but then I had a lot of those neighbors. I had a lot of angry neighbors. A lot of angry neighbors. And I thought it was all about them. Like, why do I have so many angry neighbors? What's wrong with them? But after many, many years of this and moving many times and having so many different angry neighbors, I came to realize, wait, maybe, hold on. Maybe it's me. So I started to take a look, and lo and behold, it's true. It changes everything that I think about other people is wrong. And my perception of other people can change dramatically just because I become clear on what I'm doing. When I see that I'm doing it, when I see that I'm holding the posture of conflict, when I see that I'm then interpreting that and projecting that onto other people and onto situations, then I'm left with, and this is the end of ignorance, because I'm left with just what is. And maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe I don't like it, but it doesn't matter because I'm actually seeing clearly, and 100% of the time, even if it's uncomfortable, it's better than ignorance. But I will say that for me, that's come about after I'm thoroughly convinced of it, but that's after many years now. And I do understand that oftentimes, initially, people are not so thoroughly convinced. Maybe they have a couple of experiences of it, but they're still not thoroughly convinced. It takes sometimes enough experiences of it to really become convinced. But once you see it clearly, then it's just clear. It's just clear that the only thing I've been fighting against It was just my own, I had reactions to my own reactions. That's it. It's just reactions to reactions. And I was taking them to be the truth. I thought that was fundamental reality. But again, it's because my position was one of ignorance is bliss. I was still clinging to that. And the way that shows up then is that to actually stop and to actually let go can seem terrifying. It can seem like the worst thing. It can seem like sure death. And that's where I think people get hung up. I mean, I'll give you another example, because so I was terrified of eating. You might think that's strange. Happens to some people. Happened to me. I was terrified of eating for decades. And I kept thinking that that there was somehow I was going to figure that out. That somehow I just need to, if I just keep doing this and thinking about it more and worrying about it more and trying to get it right, somehow eventually that's going to work out. And eventually came to a point where I realized, well, I'm starving, I'm dying. This is not working out. And I could see that if I continued doing what I was doing, I was going to starve myself to death. So that seemed at that point to be a bad idea. So then I chose, okay, I'm going to eat. Even though I'm afraid of eating, I'm going to eat. And I applied the same thing here. Same thing. I'm like a one-trick pony. I was afraid of eating, but I started to look, and I noticed that what I was calling fear of eating, what I was calling anxiety, was just that it was a posture. I was just very rehearsed in this posture. It involved a lot of tension. And so then I saw, well, I don't want to continue indulging that habit. So even though this provokes a lot of strong feeling, I'm going to just continue to just be present to the experience. And I saw the tension, and I saw how I was doing it, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't something that just in an instant became crystal clear. It was something that I had to keep showing up to. Just keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. And what happens then is that by becoming aware of what I do, I become aware of how to cease doing it. If I don't see what I'm doing and I don't see how I'm doing it, the likelihood of me stopping is very, very small. So I have to actually become aware of what it is that I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And then all I have to do is cease to do that. So it's like if I'm already energizing something, I'm feeding it, I'm giving it this energy habitually over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And I have to see that. And as I see that, then I realize, oh, that actually requires effort. I actually am doing that. So then it becomes clear that even though initially, because of my conditioning, I'm going to perceive that when I stop doing that, that's uncomfortable because it's unknown. I can choose to just stop anyway. And then I'm just present to what is. So what is, the nervous system is going to interpret that however it does. So out of habit, it interprets it initially as bad, because all of what was being done was to avoid what is. So initially, the perception usually is, well, what is bad. What is a threat. What is unsafe. So there's a compulsion to continue to do anything, keep doing, keep going, keep moving, keep working hard, keep contracting. But through repetition of seeing and non-indulgence of the habit of the doing, then there's a stopping. And in that stopping, then there's a greater familiarity that develops with what is unknown. So I still can't tell you what this is. You know, this that's here now, this moment, I can't tell you what this is. But I'm familiar with it. And that familiarity my neighbors are playing Led Zeppelin, and it's hard not to enjoy the music, so I just kind of want to pause. But yeah, that's good. I think that's all. I think, and so we'll open it up to questions, comments.
So my first question is, does your environment change as a result of you stopping attention?
Mm-hmm.
So what changes in the environment, if anything?
That's a good question. Well, for one, immediately, if I'm not reacting, then there's less for others to react to. So it does tend to produce a less reactive environment. For another, and I think this is the most important, is that I cease to have so much investment in the idea that I need something to change. Because if my children are making noises that I'm reacting to, then I can get drawn into this sense that this whole story, this whole narrative of they're causing me a problem. But when I'm clear on that there is no problem, I mean, that just becomes clear. If I recognize that I'm doing that my reactivity is the only thing that I have a problem with, then it just becomes, I mean, instantly, actually, just in the seeing of that, forget about anything else, just the seeing of that instantly dissolves any problem. But when I recognize that, then I don't have any enemies. My children aren't my enemies. I don't have a conflict. There's no fight. There's nothing that I need to do. I don't have any sense of urgency. I just see things as they are. It's just what's happening. I mean, there's really, if there's nobody who's getting hurt, nothing's being destroyed, then what is the problem? It's just instantly transformed.
I think the problem that I might see for myself is that I would be repressing emotions and just stuffing
Well,
down.
Yeah, so let's look at how you do that. Because if you're the way that I'm intending this description, in my experience of it, I don't see how it would or could lead to suppression. But let's look and see. I mean, you're reporting that that's your experience, so let's see where how that's coming about and what that actual experience is. So when you experience what you're describing as a suppression of emotion.
Yeah. So I'm feeling I'm feeling very angry.
Okay.
About the situation.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know that you're feeling angry?
I know because yeah, because I'm blaming. Well, the thoughts of blame.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts of revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of thinking for sure.
Right. So we know that there are thoughts.
Yeah.
Incidentally, you could also have the thought that you're the Queen of England. Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
the thoughts could say anything. So just because there's a thought doesn't mean that it's true. So you have a thought that, angry thoughts, vengeful thoughts, okay, maybe interesting, but on the other hand, how do you know that that means anything?
And then the feeling. There's
Right.
the feeling of.
So tell me more about that feeling. How do you know that you're having this feeling?
Feeling like I just want to explode, right?
Mm-hmm. So great. So the feeling is like you want to explode.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I could imagine something like that, but I don't actually know what that is. So I wonder, can you tell me more about the feeling rather than so saying that something is like saying the feeling is like something?
Yeah.
Maybe has some utility sometimes, but in this context, I would say that it's far more useful rather than saying what it's like to actually say what it is. So can you tell me about the actual feeling?
Yeah, so feeling is one of so much discomfort.
Yeah.
Right. So much discomfort.
Yeah. And so this discomfort is you feel the discomfort, and if you when you don't have body consciousness, do you have this discomfort?
No.
Right. So there seems to be an association between the body and the discomfort. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I would say that what I think we've come to, and you can tell me if you disagree on this or if you have doubt about this still, is that you have a story about anger. That story is not actually about anger. It's actually about the discomfort that you experience.
Okay.
Do you agree with that? I mean, do you see
Yes.
that that's
No, I agree.
so?
Yeah.
So this is important because we tend to, and again, this is what I was saying about the amount of effort that's required to ignore, because we can go spin round and round and round. And I'm not pointing the finger at you because I know I do it myself. But we can go round and round and round with the story of anger, and we can just, that can go, that can just inflame the situation, right? It starts out as a small thing, and then it can just grow and grow and fester. But that requires a lot of effort. You can see how much effort is required to continue to energize the thoughts of anger. And meanwhile, there is no anger. There's thoughts of anger.
It seems to me, though, Joey, that I'm pushing down the anger more.
Well,
than
yes, this is, well, yeah, we're close, but let's
Okay.
look.
Yeah.
Okay, because what I want to get clear on here is, let's not make anger primary, because if you say I'm pushing down the anger,
Yes.
then I will disagree with you, because I don't believe that that's actually true. What I believe is true, but you'll have to look to see if you can see that this is true, is that there is no anger. Let's take anger out of this for just a moment, because your fixation has been on anger, which, by the way, you don't want, right? I mean,
No, I don't. Yes, I don't want it.
But you see how the fixation is on anger, and how anger is at the center of everything, every solution that you try to come up with, and any thinking you do around it has to do with anger. And no surprise, you get more of it. So let's look and see, is there actually anger? What is anger? What are we actually talking about? Aren't we just talking about the discomfort?
Yes.
Okay, so then we could just say discomfort.
We're also talking about wanting things to be different.
Well, but these are different.
Yeah.
There's some overlap because they're connected in your nervous system. But in reality, that's not so. Because in reality, let's take a look. You say that you think your perception has been up to now that you are suppressing the anger. But when we look to see what is the anger really, we see that it's actually the discomfort. And that discomfort is something that you feel.
Yes. Yes.
So let me just connect the dots on this. So the feeling is feeling. There's feeling. There's feeling happening. It doesn't have a story. You have a story, but the feeling doesn't have a story. The feeling is just the feeling. There's just feeling happening. Then you have a story that says it's anger. But we don't even know what anger is. Anger is just a story. And then you say, well, I know it's real because I can have thoughts about it, and I feel it, and the thoughts and the feelings come together, and it's its own thing. And then I'm suppressing it. But
I've also experienced anger at me. That someone being very angry with me.
Well, so says you.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. I think I understand what you mean, which is that you have felt what you have felt and thought what you have thought when somebody else was doing what they were doing.
Okay.
Right? And your thoughts and feelings about whatever that person was doing led you to then believe that you experienced that person's anger toward you. But
yeah.
This is impossible. I mean, first of all, because you can't experience somebody else's feeling, and second of all, because there is no anger. Anger is a story. What's really happening? And I mean, this isn't, I want to be clear. I'm not asking anybody to believe this. I'm asking just that you look and see. So don't take what I'm saying to be the truth. Just look and see what I'm pointing to, because I sincerely believe that when you see this, this will be a very significant shift for you. That somebody else's anger, so-called, you can't experience that, and you can't, and there is no such thing as anger. So that person, like you, is feeling what they're feeling, and they're doing what they're doing, and they're thinking what they're thinking. And that is actually all there is to it. And in fact, the so what keeps this whole thing, the glue that keeps this whole thing going, is the insistence that there is this thing called anger that you're doing something with, that you need to figure out. But it's a phantom. There's no such thing. We talk about it as if it's a thing. But when you really look to see what it is, so it's a bit like this. Okay. So I tell you a story about the boogeyman, and then you get in bed, turn out the lights, and then you start to feel afraid. And then you say, ooh, the boogeyman's out there in the dark, the boogeyman's gonna get me. That's why I'm afraid. I'm afraid because of the boogeyman. Does your fear prove that there is a boogeyman?
No, not at all.
Obviously the answer is no. So you have in a similar way, you have this experience, a felt experience, and then you have a thought, a story that names the experience anger. And then you believe, as most of us do, because it's how we've been taught, that anger is an entity. That there's a real thing that you can have a relationship with, that you can do something with, that you can be victimized by, or that you can get in control of. And in fact, there is no such thing as anger. All there is this the experience that you're having. So the experience, and the reason this is important is because when you say you're suppressing the anger, there's just no way that you're suppressing the anger. What's actually happening is just that you're suppressing. You're not suppressing anger. The story is that you're suppressing anger. And when you have the story that you're suppressing anger, then you're afraid to stop suppressing. Because in the story, you say, well, if I stop suppressing, then the anger will be here, and that would be horrible. But if you can clearly see that you're not suppressing anger, you're just suppressing, then you actually are able to do something differently. Because then you can start to take a look at, instead of being fixated on anger, which is never going to get you what you want because it's just what you don't want, you can actually start to see what it is that's happening. You can actually see what it is that you're doing. So instead of I'm suppressing anger and then what do I do about suppressing anger, you can just start to see, how am I suppressing? Or maybe suppressing is not quite the right word, because that's always, it sort of implies that there's something being suppressed. But how am I, there's some action that you're doing habitually. It's attention and armoring. And I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to see it 100% clearly right now, but you can just start to look and see that you're doing it. So in this situation, you've got the story, whatever, whoever did what, said what. But notice right now, how completely irrelevant all of that is. I mean, none of that is happening right now. Isn't, I mean, am I wrong about that, or am I right about that?
Yeah, no, you're right about it, but yeah, you're right about it. It's not happening right now, except in thoughts of the future.
And then you can see how continuing to, I hope you can see, probably you can see how continuing this struggle within yourself only perpetuates whatever this situation is that you don't like. So you're angry, probably involves somebody else. That person's maybe not here at the moment, but if you continue with this, then when the person next shows up, you just pick it up where you left off.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even I pick it up when I left. It's in my, I'm thinking about it all the time.
Yeah. So there's another possibility. I mean, there are many possibilities, but here's another possibility. So whatever happened. If you would like things to be different, then instead of focusing on how things were, how things went,
Yeah.
you could instead just be present now to what's actually happening now. And when you're present to what's actually happening now, then you're not pulling any of the past into this. You're not cluttering this moment. And you can see probably, okay, so just imagine that for a moment. So imagine that whoever this person is that you've got these feelings with,
Yeah.
imagine that they walk into the room.
Okay.
And I want you to imagine that you don't know anything about what has happened. Just for a moment, like you've totally forgotten the past. And just imagine that you're seeing this person walk into the room and you have no past. So you can't refer to what you think they did. You're just here now.
Okay.
What is the problem?
So then the problem is all the tension that I feel.
Well, yeah, that's and so now you're seeing clearly.
Yeah.
Because that's all that ever is the problem. So when you see that the problem is the tension, then you couldn't you choose then just to drop the whole thing about the past?
I'd like nothing more.
Okay, well, so you say, but let's look more closely.
Okay.
Because if you really want nothing more, then you wouldn't choose the past over that. So what that means is, and I'm holding you to the fire a little bit.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
See how it is that in the moment what happens. So you can see now, okay, I could imagine this person walks in the room and I have no past, and then there's just tension. And so great, that's clearer. But now tell the truth. What do you think is most likely to happen if that person walks in the room now? Do you think it's likely that you're actually going to just not pick up the past, or do you think it's more likely you're going to pick up the past?
Oh, pick up the past.
Right. So why do you do that?
Because it doesn't feel like a choice.
But let's slow it down so that it becomes clear. Because I want you to just imagine the person walks in the room, and for a moment, you don't pick up the past. But then all of a sudden, you see the past there, and you notice this compulsion to grasp at the past, to do something with it. And notice why. What are you hoping that that will do for you?
That's a great question. Yeah, the problem is, as soon as that person walks in, then the anger is directed right at me, or this entity, this thing that I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I'm just trying to survive. Huh?
Well, but this is the story.
Yeah.
I mean, unless the person is physically abusing you. If the person is physically abusing you, then
I physically, more verbally.
Support. Well, so then you can look and see and really tell the deeper truth, which is that everything that you're telling yourself is a lie. So you can see, imagine again,
okay,
this person walks in and you don't, imagine, okay, so imagine this, imagine you can't, imagine that you are unable to grasp at the past. Imagine that you're unable to latch on to the story of anger. Imagine for a moment that you're unable to defend yourself against what you have up to now perceived to be verbal abuse.
Yeah.
And just imagine this for a moment, that you are just receiving this moment exactly as it is.
Okay. Yeah, and then I feel so much. I can just feel so much discomfort.
That's right. So now notice what the discomfort really is. Because you're saying, you know, one moment you're in this room by yourself. There's no past. It's just nothing.
Okay.
Then the next moment, this person walks in, and suddenly there's discomfort. And you can see how habitually, when that discomfort is present, you start reaching for stories. You start reaching to your past. Oh, right, I'm supposed to be angry with this person. They're angry with me. I remember it all now. But notice what that discomfort is and how that leads right into grasping at the past. What if you were unable to do that? I'm not saying that you should try to restrain yourself from doing it. I'm just saying, imagine for a moment that you're unable to do that, and then tell me what that might be like.
Yeah, then I wouldn't be making up stories.
Well, yes, but what would be happening?
I would just be present in the moment.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
But why? But you say that that's what you want more than anything.
Yes.
But then habitually you do something else. So let's just get clear on why is it that you forsake yourself in that moment.
Well, that's probably a habit, right?
Well, it is a habit,
Yes.
but let's get clear on what it is and what motivates it. So imagine yourself there,
Okay.
and imagine this person walks in, and imagine this person is behaving in exactly the same way that you anticipate the person will act. They're saying the things that you anticipate they'll say, using the tone that you anticipate they'll use,
Yes.
with the expression on their face that you anticipate. And just imagine that you're unable for a moment to do any of the things that you normally do. Imagine that you're not even able to contract enough to give yourself that sense of discomfort. Imagine that you're just there, open, receptive to this experience.
I like that.
Well, good. That's nice. When that's nice. I mean, I wouldn't expect that all people would necessarily like that. So there's a quality to it that is very, very wonderful, because it's so open and free. But then there's also a quality to it that you are averse to.
Yeah. Yes.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, I just that part just wants to hide or run or.
Yeah. So now,
Or that part actually feels very trapped.
yes,
Yeah, I feel very trapped.
great. So that is the thing that you want to see,
Yeah. Okay.
because you can see that this is what drives you to forsake yourself. Because you say you want to be present, you want to be free more than anything. And then in the moment, this sense of being trapped, almost without fail and almost without question, causes you to forsake yourself.
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
So that's the thing you want to see. You want to see, this is what you want to know. This is what you want to know. It's what you thought you wanted to avoid,
Okay.
but actually you want to know it. Because you have tried, I can say this with a fair degree of confidence just because it's how it usually works. So this is very old. I mean, this is like an ancient thing. It's older than you,
Okay.
much older than you, because it's like a primal experience of I'm trapped, I want to hide.
Yeah.
And so when we encounter these things, if we're trying to figure it out at the level of the story, we're never going to get anywhere, because who can come up with a satisfying story about that? You just can't. This is something very, very primal. It's not about what you think it's about. It's definitely not about the other person. It's not about anger. it's just what it is. It's just exactly the experience that it is, but we so quickly leap away from it that we never really come to know it. And so if you want, if you really want to know freedom with it, freedom even when this occurs, so that you don't have a sense of obligation, that you're not obligated or required to hide, you're not required to lash out, you're not required to react at all, then the good news is that you're being presented with that opportunity to be intimate with it frequently. And the only thing that's an obstacle to that real intimacy is the clinging to ignorance is bliss. So
Okay.
now you're not ignorant because you're actually seeing. We've explored this a little bit.
Yes,
So
yes.
now you can see, okay, well, I was ignoring because I was pretending like this was about anger, when in fact it's that there's this primal sense that I'm calling feeling trapped.
Yeah.
So then can you just allow, so this is an important thing, I think.
Okay.
So if you were actually trapped, maybe this would be different. This would be different. So it's useful just to see, are you actually trapped? Now you might be able to tell stories about how you're actually trapped, but are you really trapped? Are you in a trap?
No.
Right. So you can see that even the story of that this is about I'm trapped is still a story. Right. So the reality of the experience is prior to words. It's like I said, it's primal. There are no words that are a perfect fit for it. And you can just stay with the directness of that experience. So when this person walks into the room, you can just stay with the directness of the experience that you're calling entrapment.
Okay.
And don't attempt to think your way out of it. Don't attempt to fight your way out of it. Don't try to get out of it at all. Just continue to be present to the experience, the actuality of it, so that you see it as it is, because the habit is still going to be to want to indulge this idea that it's about anger and it's about them and you're feeling their anger, and on and round it goes. But now that you know better, you see more clearly, then you know that continuing to indulge that won't get you what you want. It will only reinforce what you don't want. You'll just get more of the same story of anger and suppression. But what you can start to see is, here I am. Here's all of these sensations, all of this experience occurring, and you can just be witness to the compulsions to indulge the old habits of, I should think about how this is about anger. I should think about the past. I should think about what they did to me. I should think about what I did. I should think about how shameful I am. I should think about how shameful they are, round and round. And when you see all of those compulsions arising, and you just rest, so that you're not fighting with them, you're not suppressing anything because you're not doing anything, you're just observing, then you just see it more clearly, and then you're no longer going to, for sure, when you are clear on this, the situation will change, for sure, because the situation is 100% only what you've projected onto it. But also be beware of the tendency to try and do things to affect a particular outcome. So if you say, well, I'm going to do what Joey says because then the situation will change and then I'll feel better, then, which I'm only mentioning this just because it's a mistake I've made many times, then it's not going to work very well. So because the whole it's I guess it's a paradox is that the situation, the circumstance changes when we let go, when we really let go. If I let go completely of my belief that it needs to be different in order for me to be okay, then the circumstances change. Because the circumstances were generated by my own struggle. When I give up the struggle, the circumstances change. So I can't get to the thing. I can't produce the outcome that I think that I need. But the circumstances will change when I let go of needing, of the belief that I need it to be different. Because then you're seeing clearly, so you're seeing what's actually happening. And of course, you're going to see your own innocence and this other person's innocence. I mean, can you see your innocence in this whole circumstance? I mean, if you see,
Oh, I can see my innocence.
can you see
And I
your
also see
innocence?
the other person's innocence.
Say that again.
I can see my innocence and the other person too.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to see it all the way,
Yeah. Okay.
and that means through all of it, even to the heart of what you perceive as the most unforgivable.
Okay.
Because there's something I can virtually guarantee there's something that you still hold as unforgivable.
Okay.
Otherwise, you know, when we really see our own innocence and the innocence of others, then we know that what people say is nothing to grasp at. There's nothing that we need to do with it. It's not something that we need to try to fix. We don't even need to understand it. It just comes and goes, and we allow it to come and go. The same as like the breeze comes and goes. Every time there's a breeze, we don't lie around for hours ruminating about it. Oh, that breeze, oh, it went west, it should have gone east. We don't do that. But if somebody says something, we can be very upset for a long time because we say it should have been the other way. They should have said it a different way. They should have understood it differently. But when we really see the innocence, and we see that nobody understands anything. Nobody understands anything. And nothing. Nobody understands anything. Nobody understands anything that anybody else says. Nobody understands anything that they think. You know, you don't even understand your own thoughts.
That's a relief. Yeah, that's a relief.
Yeah, and so it's the same as the breeze or the clouds or anything. We don't need to put it right. We don't need to do anything with it, especially since the only thing we concern ourselves with is what already is done. You see, you know, it's like, why am I going to be sitting here arguing about what direction the wind was blowing yesterday? It doesn't matter at all. It would be just as silly for me to argue what direction the wind is blowing now. At least I could observe now. Yesterday is done. And so in the same way, we're often so consumed with reviewing what happened, trying to set it right, trying to organize that in some way. And in fact, it's just all, we've got this clutter that we've been accumulating because we've been trying to hold on to so much from the past that's totally dissatisfying to us. You know, like this situation with this person, whatever happened yesterday, I can guarantee it was not satisfying to you. And so then why review it? Why go over what you already know wasn't satisfying? The only thing to do with that is just file it away as wasn't satisfying. And then here we are presented with this newness now. It's always a new start, right? It's always when the person walks in the room now, they're always walking into the room for the first time. There is no past. The past is just something that we're making up. And so when the person walks in, it's absolutely, without a doubt, always a fresh start. But we can see how we drag the past into it, and then we're arguing about which way did the wind blow yesterday, which was, we've already done. We already argued about that. It wasn't satisfying then. Why is it going to be satisfying now? And that's not what we want. And again, this is like to get clear on what we want. So what do we want? In this case, what do we want? We want forgiveness. Isn't that so? We want forgiveness.
Yeah.
So we need to start, and this is this is like maybe the more succinct way to say everything else. That I'll wrap it up in one sentence, which is practice now what you want. So if you want forgiveness, if you get clarity on forgiveness, that you want forgiveness, just choose forgiveness now. And then you'll say, well, I don't know how to forgive. Yes, exactly. So don't muck around in the past trying to find out how to forgive, because you've never done it satisfactorily until now. Now it's possible. Now is the possible moment for true forgiveness. And that's always the case. And it doesn't matter what's happened. I mean, people forgive what we would consider to be completely unforgivable, and they forgive truly. And it's, if anybody can do it, we can do it.
Okay. Thank you, Joy. The only thing is, I'm not sure what I'm holding that I think is unforgivable.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's not, very good question. It's not, again, it's not a thing.
Okay.
And this is an important point. We often think that forgiveness is going to be a mental process that we're going to work out, and we're going to have to understand in the story who did what happened, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Because guess what? Your story, their story, somebody else's story, all different. Who could actually tell you for sure what's the truth? Nobody. So we don't need to care about a story of forgiveness. We don't need to care about what needs to be forgiven. We don't need to care about any of that. All we have to do is see how we hold unforgiveness.
Okay.
The only thing that's an obstacle to forgiveness is the holding of unforgiveness. So if I want forgiveness, all I have to do is see how I'm holding unforgiveness, and I have the answer. So unforgiveness is a posture, right? Can you see that? Can you see how, so think about something where any situation where you have a lingering sense of unforgiveness.
Okay.
And then just notice, what is that unforgiveness? How do you know that you have that?
Yeah, tension.
Right. So when you see that's all that it is, that is all, sincerely, that in and of itself is all that's necessary. If you just continue to see that, just keep seeing truly, that's it. Nothing else is needed. Nothing needs to change. The feeling doesn't need to change. The thoughts don't need to change. The circumstances don't need to change. Nothing needs to change. All you need to do is see that. And it's also nice to let go. So you can choose then to explore the possibility of letting go simply by continuing to be present to and aware of how you hold unforgiveness. It's just a process. So it's back to this example I was given with the fingers. If I'm pressing the fingers together, so we'll say this is unforgiveness. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm pressing the fingers together, and this is unforgiveness. Now, if I don't know that, then I'm looking everywhere else. I'm saying, oh, I feel so terrible. I wonder why that is. I don't know. It must be over there, must be up there, maybe back there. I'm looking everywhere. I'm ignoring the thing that's right here. Eventually, somebody points it out, and I realize, oh, yeah, that right there is what I've been calling unforgiveness all along. So now, first of all, and this is why I say just the seeing is all that's really necessary, because in the seeing, now I know what it is. Before, I didn't know. Before, I was looking everywhere else, and I'm saying, I don't know, it could be the boogeyman, because I don't know, I'm not sure. As soon as I see it, I know exactly what it is. It removes all of the distress because I see it for what it is. I say, oh, this thing I've been calling unforgiveness, it was just this.
Right.
Before, it was this giant thing that I thought I had to do something about, and now I see, oh no, it's just this. Okay, good. So now, if I'm interested, I can take it a little bit further, because I could start to become curious. Well, this is it is uncomfortable. So I want to know, how am I doing this? Now at this stage, if at the superficial level, people are going to come along and they're going to say, I've got the solution to your problem. The problem is, we've done all this research and we have all this evidence to prove that the one problem in life is this. And don't worry if, you don't have to, we've got an easy solution. We've got a device. It's $39.95. We'll send it to you. And you stick it in and it just pries your fingers open. And you say, well, that sounds good. That sounds like that might work. It seems logical. Problem is, it won't work, because it might pry your fingers open, but it didn't actually do anything for you useful. And you don't need a device. All you need is to be present to the experience and observe how you do this. Because again, simply bringing the fingers apart is not what you want. In fact, you can bring the fingers apart in a way that produces more tension than pressing the fingers together. So we don't want to just mimic the outcome. What we want is to become aware of how we do this. When we become aware, which we become aware just by observing the direct experience, then we start to learn how to inhibit that. And as we learn to inhibit it, we're making less effort. We're not exerting more effort on top. We're actually making less effort. And so we cease to experience that underlying strain all the time, which is constantly feeding back that there's something wrong. So it's helpful because we see, so we now know that the thing that's been telling us there's something wrong is just this and not the boogeyman. And then the second thing is that we can then actually start to inhibit that so that we're no longer getting that noise in the system that's constantly being interpreted as there's something wrong. So everything just becomes smoother. So you can just simply observe your experience, and you'll notice that when this person, and you can do it now. You can imagine the person walking into the room, and you can practice it. Why not? That's what I would do, and then you'll know for sure when the person comes in, it's going to be, the intensity will, I say for sure, 99% likely, when the person actually walks in the room, the intensity will be higher. But if you've been exploring, this is important, you've been exploring this within yourself, you will, your experience of when that person actually walks in the room will be different than if you hadn't been exploring it. Because why? Because it was never a dynamic between you and that person anyway.
Yes.
It was only your own reactivity.
Wow. That's so helpful, Joey. Thank you so
So
much.
so let me know. I mean, put that into practice and let me know.
I will for sure.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm gonna go. The kids are gonna be back soon. Oh, let me see. Sorry, there's one message that came across. Should you? Well, I'll look now. Hold on. Oh my goodness, it's a long one. Do you believe there is some use in the who inquiry? I mean, who am I? And then it says, it's like the problem appears to be the extroversion of the idea of yourself on the surface. Seems like discomfort is technically a thought as well. So it seems like the story seems like centered about you, but then is it? Okay. So I think the good observations. The is discomfort technically a thought? Yes. It's definitely an interpretation. And then if it seems like the story is centered around you, then the question is the inquiry of who am I useful? I think that's the question you're asking. And I think many people find that inquiry to be very useful. I think that the challenge with that inquiry is that it tends to turn into something that's very mental. Because people are still looking for an object. So if you really, all the inquiry that I would say any inquiry fundamentally comes down to the same thing. It's really just about seeing what is. So the who am I inquiry is about seeing what is. But in order to see this, you're seeing what is not. So in a sense, any inquiry is like this. We're seeing what we habitually have considered to be real, and then we're looking to see what is the actual nature or reality of this. And we see that the actuality of what we perceived as being real is empty of what it is that we thought it was. So that's similar to the inquiry that we were just doing with anger. We talk about anger. We think there's such a thing as anger, and now we're at war with anger. It could be anything. Depression. Could be sadness. Could be physical pain. Could be anything. We do this with all kinds of things. We think that there's a thing there. Money, relationships. I mean, anything. We think there's something there, and then we go to war with it, or we're trying to do something. We're trying to manipulate it. The inquiry is to see what is the actual reality of this. And we see that it's empty of what we thought it was. The thing isn't there. The anger isn't there. There's no anger. There's the actual experience. There's the direct experience. And when we start to see the direct experience, then we're able to recognize what we're doing. When we recognize what we're doing, then the possibility of not doing that arises, which had never happened before. That's, to me, is a miracle, because prior to that moment of seeing, we had never actually realized the possibility of not doing that thing. So our reality, our sense of reality, our perception of what is real becomes very narrow and fixated, and we start to feel very boxed in and trapped because we perceive that there are no other options. But that's because we are reacting compulsively, and we just continue to energize the same rut over and over and over. So the inquiry in general which just allows us to see what is, allows us to see the emptiness of the things that we thought were there. So all of the things that we've been fighting with, all of the feelings, all of the thoughts, all of the sensations, all of the situations, all the circumstances, all of these things, we see the emptiness of them. And then we see what is the reality. The reality that we had previously been assigning to these things is much nearer than we thought, just like what we were just looking at with this inquiry. So we start and we think it's about anger, and we think it's about this situation and this person, and then we start to see, by inquiring into the actual nature of what's really happening, we see what I think it is about doesn't exist. It's not real. It doesn't even have, there's nothing there. What is real? What can I actually experience directly? And this, we start to notice, is, okay, I seem to have this ability to either indulge or to rest and just simply see, observe. And if I just choose to rest and see, observe, then I start to see my reality opens up. It opens up because I'm no longer energizing what I don't want. I'm instead seeing what is. And what is expansive. So I hope that answered the question. And now I'll go. So thank you, everybody. See you next week. Bye for now.